Kia ora everybody. This video is to take you through the close analysis of language and unpacking that language for Salome by Carol Ann Duffy. So this is very similar to the Medusa analysis that you have already done. You will need to stop and start the video as you go through and take your notes. So this is what you're going to need for this lesson. You're going to need a copy of Salome, either your own paper copy from class, or if you don't have it, you can access the week 7 lockdown assignment and there's a digital copy on there. If you're using paper, you're going to need a few highlighters, maybe around 5, just to make sure you can track everything. So the same deal is that we're going to go through the poem, unpack individual language features for meaning, and you'll need to take the notes as you go. Just to keep in mind, similar to last week, that the highlighter colours do not correlate between the stanzas. So that means that maybe yellow might be used to identify an allusion in stanza 1, and then yellow might be used to identify a metaphor in stanza 2. There's just too much going on in the poem to keep the colours consistent, so all of the stanzas are standalone. So make sure you get yourself all ready and organised to go, and then pause the video as you need to. So let's start by reading through the poem in its entirety so we get a sense of what we're actually looking at here. I'd done it before, and doubtless I'll do it again, sooner or later. Woke up with a head on the pillow beside me. Whose? What did it matter? Good looking, of course, dark hair, rather matted, the reddish beard several shades lighter, with very deep lines around the eyes, from pain, I'd guess, maybe laughter, and a beautiful crimson mouth that obviously knew how to flatter, which I kissed, colder than pewter. Strange. What was his name? Peter? Simon? Andrew? John? I knew I'd feel better for tea, dry toast, no butter, so rang for the maid. And indeed, her innocent clatter of cups and plates, her clearing of clutter, her regional patter were just what I needed, hungover and wrecked as I was from a night on the batter. Never again. I needed to clean up my act, get fitter, cut out the booze and the fags and the sex. Yes, and as for the latter, it was time to turf out the blighter, the beater or biter who'd come like a lamb to the slaughter to Salome's bed. In the mirror, I saw my eyes glitter. I flung back the sticky red sheets, and there, like I said, and ain't life a bitch, was his head on a platter. So let's get into this analysis. Stanza 1. I'd done it before, and doubtless I'll do it again sooner or later. Woke up with a head on the pillow beside me. Whose? What did it matter? So in the pink there, we're looking at the specific use of tone. In the brackets there, I'd done it before and doubtless I'll do it again sooner or later. There's really no shame in what she's saying here, right? So woke up with a head on the pillow beside me. She's spent the night with somebody, she's woken up and she knows she's going to do it again. She really doesn't care what we think here, right? She's not embarrassed or regretful or anything. She's just, there is no shame here. So it sets up the poem straight away with this voice of pride and not really caring what anybody thinks. Which is supported with this pun here, woke up with the head on the pillow beside me. So a pun meaning there's a double meaning in that line. So it's a reference, an allusion to the head from the original story of Salome, John the Baptist's head on a platter, but there's also those morning after connotations. She spent the night with this mystery man, and I mean, at this point, she's not actually aware that he's dead, that it's just his head. So there's a double meaning in that line to reference the original and also to kind of tell us what's been going on the night before. And in the green here, there's this also tone and this indirect address. So whose? What did it matter? So whose head? She doesn't recognize the face. And what did it matter? So in terms of the tone, she's very blasé. She really doesn't care here, right? She's like, what? Who is it? Ah, who cares? So she's just does not care. Um, and in terms of the indirect address, it's really not clear who she's actually talking to here. Is she talking to us as the reader? Is she talking to herself? Like, is it just sort of like she's just talking her way through her morning? Um, Whoever she's talking to, I think it's kind of irrelevant, because she's going to talk anyway. She's not speaking to us. She's not telling us a story. She's not, you know, working her way through her problems with us. She's just speaking, and we just happen to be here. So she's not talking to us or for us, which gives the sense of, I suppose, independence, and strength of character. Moving on to stanza 2. Good looking, of course, dark hair, rather matted, the reddish beard several shades lighter, with very deep lines around the eyes. From pain, I'd guess, maybe laughter, and a beautiful crimson mouth that obviously knew how to flatter, which I kissed, colder than pewter. Strange. What was his name? Peter? So in the green there's most of that stanza, when she's discussing this random head's physical features. There's a real sense of irony in there. Salome's objectifying this man. She's only focusing on his looks. She focuses on his looks before his name, right? So that's objectification, which we know has happened to women for centuries, being seen as objects as opposed to people. So this is really clever because we know it's unusual for a woman to objectify a man in this way. I mean, in society, quote unquote, right? So there's a real role reversal here, and kind of bringing attention to these double standards, that it's okay for men to objectify women, but when women objectify men, it's unusual. And we're going, well, what's wrong with her? Why is she such a cow, right? So it's this real sense of irony, drawing attention to those double standards for men and women and the way we treat each other. And there's this line here with very deep lines around the eyes. So she's talking about his physical appearance, and this line is particularly critical. So she's commenting very deep lines around the eyes, which is quite critical of his appearance, which also implies beauty standards. Like, oh, is he looking old, or is it, what is that? So again, the expectations have been reversed here. Carol Ann Duffy's reversing the expectations on men and women. This woman is saying, oh, well, he's got some imperfections in his face there. She's being critical, which again, we're very used to that for women, but turning the tables, we're not so used to. So it's really drawing attention again to that, those double standards, those expectations on one gender and not the other. And a beautiful crimson mouth that obviously knew how to flatter, in yellow there. So she's talking about his mouth and this idea that she's like, obviously she could be flattered by him while they're in bed, right? But there's this awareness and intelligence there. She is very aware of flattery and games that people play. She's not foolish. It gives us the sense that she's very much aware and in control of the situation. In this instance, she has not been taken advantage of. She has been in control and making decisions and been aware all the way through, which again changes the narrative a little bit, because with stories about women's sexual exploits from history, it's been either frowned upon or very much they've been victims. So this is neither of those things. She is in control. That obviously knew how to flatter, which I kissed, colder than pewter. So she's kissed his mouth, and she said it's very cold, right? We know he's dead, right? So that would be why. But she's going, that's weird. It's a simile and an allusion. So the allusion is the reference to the original story, where John the Baptist's head was presented on a platter. It was a silver platter. And pewter is a much cheaper metal than silver. It's the same color, but it's what they make trophies and things out of. So it's worth a lot less. So she's kind of illustrating his worthlessness to her. Like, she could have said colder than ice, or colder than metal, or even colder than silver, but she's chosen to say pewter, which is this kind of illustrating the worthlessness a bit to her. So she really doesn't care about this guy, whoever he is. This is strange. What was his name? Peter, Simon, Andrew, John. I knew I'd feel better for tea, dry toast, no butter, so rang for the maid. And indeed, her innocent clatter of cups and plates, her clearing of clutter, her regional patter, were just what I needed, hungover and wrecked as I was from a night on the batter. So in the blue here, so from the previous stanza 2, Peter, Simon, Andrew, John, that's a biblical allusion, a reference to the Bible in some way. Those are all names of biblical characters, male characters in the Bible. So listing off those names, she's kind of throwing them away. She doesn't know who's who. She's just like, which one is this? Which is definitely subverting those expectations, because men, as we know, are usually central to Bible stories. The male characters are central. So she's kind of throwing their names away, like, oh, who's this one? It doesn't matter, which very much subverts what we know about biblical stories, because she's central to her story right now. She's telling the story, so it changes the narrative. And we also get an impression that there's been a lot of men. If she can't remember his name, we get this impression that she's been with a lot of men. And it's interesting how we're supposed to respond to that, because modern societal expectations and even biblical societal expectations, we're going, oh no, that's not good, what a slut. But do we have those same expectations for men? And the answer is no, right? So it's important how we register, the way we respond to this. And it's interesting here when she goes, Peter, Simon, Andrew, John, I knew I'd feel better for tea, dry toast. So in that same line, there's a real abrupt shift, a very quick, obvious shift. She stops caring immediately about what this guy's name is. She's far more concerned with herself, which shows the sense of sort of maybe, I suppose, selfishness, or whatever you want to call it, still subverting expectations, because there's the societal expectation that women should care very deeply and emotionally for their partners, where there isn't the same expectation for men. So I think it's illustrating that quite clearly there. So I knew I'd feel better for tea, dry toast, no butter, so rang for the maid. So it's interesting, there's a reference here to women in service, and historically women being in service. She still has a female maid, implying that there's women below her. And it's interesting, Duffy could have made this character a man, but she has chosen to keep the maid as a woman to, I think, still illustrate women are still in service, and maybe sometimes that women in charge still have women below them, because the patriarchy seeps into all aspects of lives like that. It's just a thought. And then she talks about her, so indeed her innocent clatter of cups and plates, her clearing of clutter. So the maids come in and cleaning up, obviously the room's a mess, and her regional patter, which means her accent, the way she talks, were just what I needed. So the tone here is very sarcastic and very arrogant. She said, oh, why is this woman coming in and making so much noise when I'm hungover? Stop. So she's insulting her regional patter, so her accent that's maybe from a different region. She really does think she's better than her in this moment. She's quite sarcastic, she's quite arrogant. And again, in this moment, are we supposed to dislike her, or are these qualities that we would actually admire in a male character, right? So we need to be careful that we don't judge her unequally with how we would judge a male character. And she says, hungover and wrecked as I was from a night on the batter, which is very much modernized language, right? They did not say hungover in biblical times. So the language is modern there, batter meaning alcohol. So it's communicating very clearly to us as modern readers. And she's obviously familiar with this feeling, right? So she's been here before. She knows this. It's not the first time. So we get the impression that this is what she kind of does for fun. And again, are we judging her for this? And if we are judging her, are we judging her because she is a woman? Stanza 4. Never again. I needed to clean up my act, get fitter, cut out the booze and the fags and the sex. Yes, and as for the latter, it was time to turf out the blighter, the beater or biter, who'd come like a lamb to the slaughter, to Salome's bed. So in here, she says, never again, I needed to clean up my act. This kind of ownership or awareness, ownership of her actions, like she's got some realization in this moment that what she's doing isn't necessarily a good thing. Maybe she needs to stop. Maybe she's sick of feeling hungover or having lots of nights with different people, but she's got this some realization here. To get fitter, cut out the booze and the fags and the sex. Fags meaning cigarettes, right? That's old slang for cigarettes. But again, it's modernized language, so it's communicating to us clearly. She's speaking to a modern audience, and she's obviously familiar with this lifestyle. So Carol Ann Duffy's painting this modern picture of a woman who drinks a lot, smokes a lot, has a lot of sex, and pulling up our criticisms of women who do that. So she's drawing attention to how we are critical of women who follow these kind of paths, but much less critical of men. And as for the latter, it was time to turf out the blighter, the beater or biter. So she's saying like, well, oh yeah, by the way, this guy in my bed, I'm just time to get rid of him because I need to start my day, right? But remember, she's talking about John the Baptist. We know who that is because of the original story. John the Baptist was a saint, but she's not using his name. She doesn't even know his name, the blighter, beater, or biter. So kind of insulting him almost shows his lack of importance in the story, which is very much a role reversal from the original tale, right? His name, who he is, doesn't even matter to Salome's story, which in the original, you know, Salome barely matters. She's just this slut who's the cause of John the Baptist's death. And it's in this point, it's almost sacrilegious because he's a saint, right? Which is similar to the objectification from stanza 2. She objectified him in stanza 2 and is now, she doesn't even know his name and is kind of insulting him almost. So very much, because she doesn't use his name, very much shows this role reversal in the original story. This is her story. Doesn't matter who he is, which is unusual for a biblical story. And who'd come like a lamb to the slaughter to Salome's bed. So lamb to the slaughter is a biblical allusion again. In paintings and art, Jesus is often symbolized by a lamb. And that's also used as a symbol for sacrifice. So this kind of naivety and innocence, this purity, this lamb to the slaughter, which contrasts very much with her and the way she's presented herself. She is not naive, she is not innocent, she is certainly not pure. So it's almost funny to us, like she's creating this contrast and she's almost having a laugh, I think, at this point. On a side note, that's what Mary Had a Little Lamb is based on. Mary from the Bible. Mary had a little lamb, fleece as white as snow. Interesting. So who'd come like a lamb to the slaughter to Salome's bed. Interesting that she doesn't say my bed. She's talked about herself in the third person, which to me is this kind of sense of infamy, like her bed is infamous. It's very famous. Everyone knows Salome's bed, and she's very proud of that. And this really isn't convincing us that she wants to clean up her act. You know, it took her sort of 3 lines going, oh yeah, I'm going to change, And then by the end of the stanza, she's going, oh, actually, this is really cool. Like, I'm famous, you know? So a real sense of infamy in that third person. She didn't say my bed or the bed. She said Salome's bed. Like, everybody knows what that is. And she's proud of that. Okay? She's happy about it. Stanza 5, last stanza. In the mirror, I saw my eyes glitter. I flung back the sticky red sheets, and there, like I said, and ain't life a bitch, was his head on a platter. So she saw her eyes glitter in the mirror, which is a metaphor, right? Your eyes don't actually glitter, but when somebody describes it that in that way, it's about like admiration or pride. Like when somebody looks at you and their eyes glitter, they're admiring you in some way. So, and she's looking in the mirror, so she's got this pride and admiration for herself. She's quite vain, right? And this really does not support the idea that she's convincing us that she's going to change. She's probably not going to change because she's very proud of who she is and what she does. She loves it. So that tone change from stanza 4 was very, very short-lived. She went, oh, I suppose maybe I'll change. Nah, it's too much fun. So there really is no change for her in this poem. So saw my eyes glitter, I flung back the sticky red sheets, so there's real imagery there and a sense of tone. The tone, I flung back the sticky red sheets, she's really not surprised by that. Like the sheets are all gross, but she's not like, ooh, she's just kind of like, oh, this is normal. Like she's been lying in the bed for a while, so she will have known that that was the case. Like, so this is very normal. Red, obviously meaning bloody, so that's quite graphic. That imagery is quite like, ugh, gross, because it's a severed head, right? Why are the sheets sticky? Because this is a recorded video, I'm not going to go into detail there, but I think you can get my implication based on Salome's actions and what we know about her. But it's interesting that are we actually supposed to be disgusted at this moment, and why? Why are we disgusted? Would we be as disgusted if it was a man, or would we go, oh yeah, well that makes sense? Those real double standards again of how we expect men and women to behave. So she flicks the sheets back, and there, like I said, and ain't life a bitch, so blasé here. Actually quite funny. It's like, oh, this is just another day, another severed head in my bed. Ah, jeez. Right? So she's just so blasé, and we are supposed to find that funny. Like, she just does not, like, oh, this again, you know. So she really just doesn't care. And finally, was his head on a platter. So that allusion to the original story, the John the Baptist head on a platter, right? So she's tied back to the original tale. But she's not shocked. She's not sorry. She's just like, oh, look at that, which is not really how we would expect a person to react in this moment. So Salome as a character and as a voice is breaking down so many stereotypes of what we expect women to think and act like and behave and say. So through the entire poem, she subverts all these different expectations, and right at the end, there's this real tone and sense of, and okay, whatever, this is it then. So very much in control of herself and not willing to change for anyone or anything.